The values of ethics and morals. The following interest theoretical explanation should make it easier for the human being to understand why he or she should form and lead his or her life and existence ethically, morally. Ethics and morals are both undoubtedly related and often equated, but there is a decisive difference because the respective norms and values of morals are considered to be a sole group, whereas ethics rather describes what is right or wrong, which can be explained by a different and scientific description as a general discussion of right and wrong. Nevertheless, ethics and morals will be explained in context below. Everywhere there are opportunities to behave consciously according to ethics and morals, to behave politely, honestly, tolerantly, and considerately, thus in daily life as well as throughout life in general. As ethical moral behavior in the naturally given form can be practiced in all situations of existence, thus in all private areas, in every society, at work, with friends and acquaintances, as well as in the family, with everyone's dealings, and also in road traffic, and so forth. Ethics and morals are also practical instructions for the life conduct, for conditions and rules that are of value in this respect, as well as for correct actions and doings, which human beings have to concern themselves with again and again. In particular, with that, always in the foreground are ethics and morals in their worthy traditional forms, which are listed as special values, namely the protection of life, free will, right action, and the maintenance of freedom. The values and rules that are generally accepted in the family, in a friendship, acquaintance, or society are thus referred to as ethical moral. When it is thereby said that a human being has acted or is acting ethically, morally correct, then this means that he or she has made such an effort with his or her behavior, or is making such an effort as human beings have found or find to be right and good. In the process, the values and rules of ethics and morals are considered good and are generally recognized as valuable. With ethics and morals, there are also certain recommendations that prescribe a certain ethical moral action, such as being explicitly recommended in writing or verbally. You shall not kill, as well as you shall not steal, in which case without these recommendations as laws, a living together in a society is not possible in a good form. An unethical, immoral action is precisely wrong and bad when it is carried out, even though it is contrary to duty and is carried out due to carelessness, anger, or explicitly because there's a bad and vengeful or selfish motive behind it. The interhuman life is actually naturally regulated ethically, morally, and thus by the natural ethics and morals, in which case these also have a regulating function, and indeed in connection with all the entire values throughout legitimization, which are not naturally given to human beings, but must be consciously learned separately by them. Ethics and morals provide a fundamental normative framework for the behavior and activities of human beings toward their fellow human beings in the family, friendships, acquaintances, and within society. With regard to the human species, ethics and morals are primarily concerned with the naturally given basic principle of behavior toward one's fellow human beings, but also, which is not usually said by the science of psychology because it apparently does not even know this, toward planet Earth, toward nature and its fauna and flora. However, the ethical moral values also refer to questions of sexuality, just as they are not and never limited to very many other things, but are extremely important, such as with regard to logic, the intellect, rationality, and responsibility. These have always applied in particular and in every case and must apply for all future. The thoughts and feelings alone, which can lead, for example, from an ethical moral gratification to an indignation, pity, or guilt, up to strange emotions, are to be divided into values which the human being normally never becomes conscious of. I think that's a good spot to pause. It tends to run in with other things we've been talking about. So I'd like to open up the floor for a little discussion. Ethics and morals are fundamentally concerned with human actions of good and evil, as well as right and wrong, and indeed, in particular, of behavior. These values developed naturally already many hundreds of millions of years ago, and in the course of evolution have been naturally stored as penchants in all life forms, and thus also in the fundamental values in human beings. In this case, while otherwise the majority of all values, however, must be acquired by human beings themselves through education and self-education and so forth. Fundamentally, the basic definitions of ethics and morals of human beings are therefore nothing that enable them to do what is ethically, morally right, whereas the large remainder of all ethical and moral values that distinguish the human beings from all other life forms must be learned by themselves because they are not naturally pre-given. Indeed, the human being has a personality with a consciousness, which he or she can use consciously and also in an instinctive feeling-based form. This in contrast to other life forms, which can use their consciousness only weakly, part consciously, and instinctively. And if human beings learn the many other values of ethics and morals, then they raise themselves into being humans in the real and true sense, and thus also to leading a social living together in their own wise, which is free of hatred, frowns upon any revenge and retaliation, calumny and dishonesty of any kind, as they also do not carry out Gewalt, do not commit murder and manslaughter, and thus also do not know any enmity and do not wage any wars. Ethics and morals do not only mean that one should not kill, but they also say that war should not be waged and that the death sentence should not be imposed, but also that the human being should not quarrel, should not hate, should not use Gewalt, and so forth. However, ethics and morals also say that the human being should be self-conscious, self-confident, dutiful, and honest, and so forth. It is claimed that ethical moral views regarding drugs and sex and so forth are hereditary by about 50%, while the remaining 50% of the deviation is explained by the unique social environment. However, it cannot be seen like this in accordance with natural ethics and morals, which are in fact, in a nature-based form, completely directed toward ensuring the living together of each species and kind, depending on their own kind. This naturalness of the ethical moral values, however, comprises only the smallest part, because the great entirety of ethics and morals is to be worked out by human beings themselves. However, with regard to all values of the entire ethics and morals, these are to be determined individually by each personality, whether they are worked out or not. Explicitly with regard to views and assumptions, these are indeed neither for anything, nor are they directly or indirectly hereditary, because these values must be rightly learned consciously and willingly, and also be implemented. Children already unconsciously learn the naturally given parts of ethics and morals when they are still very small, because as a rule, they are already indoctrinated with it after birth, namely without this being perceived by the parents and thus not realized. The whole thing happens in such a wise that the newborns are quite naturally looked after and cared for by the natural ethical moral coddling of the mother and father. This is just as the first living creatures did hundreds of millions of years ago as a natural form, thus enabling the living together of the families and the herds of the life forms, and as it happens unconsciously today through the human being. A part of the human beings, however, as a result of their personalities and the might of their consciousnesses used by them, is able to take ethical moral decisions with conscious thoughts and feelings arising therefrom. This happens while the much larger part of human beings, without being conscious of it, cultivates pseudo thoughts and has fallen prey to a belief delusion addiction. Consequently, they are living in belief and frown upon reality and its truth and punish it with their belief. Gosh, I just lost my spot. A sign of the belief, be it religious or worldly, is deeply embedded in the character of the human beings, and that they are not capable of perceiving reality as it really is. These human beings have a false, fine spiritual perception out of their belief. Consequently, they also cannot distinguish reality and its truth, as well as the unreal and the untrue as right or wrong. The inevitable consequence of this is that, as a result of their belief delusion addiction, they deem it to be right, however, reality to be wrong, and vehemently defend their belief. They are therefore neither capable of recognizing the negative nor the positive, nor do they know or understand that the true, the good, and the right does not come and grow by itself, but it must first be planted and fostered before it can be harvested and directed toward the right lines of logic and intellect. Therefore, human beings who have fallen prey to a belief delusion addiction must first find a seed that germinates in them, grows forth, and allows them to take right ethical moral decisions that are far from belief, however truthfully and worthy. Human beings who are effectively self-thinking and therefore not believers, whose duty it is to create their own thoughts and to direct right and valueful feelings. Consequently, they therewith also build up a healthy and positive psychic condition, are truly ones who lead their lives in a worthy wise and are able to master their existence at any time.